Hey folks, thanks for checking out the Wait What If podcast. I am your host, Kevin Sullivan, sitting on a back porch in the middle of a Saturday afternoon in June in North Carolina. It is hot. It is very hot out here. And I'm only out here because it's a Saturday afternoon, and typically I record at night. I can record anywhere because it's nice and quiet. But in my neighborhood, there are children everywhere, especially in my house. So I've sought refuge in the backyard. Tonight we have a really cool guest, one of my favorite guests. It is James Barrat, author of Our Final Invention, and recently featured on the new documentary, Do You Trust This Computer? If you haven't seen that movie, check it out. It's all about AI and where it's going. I've been on an AI kick. Well, I was on an AI kick, I guess, for the last couple years, ever since reading James Barrat's book. I had not given AI too much thought beyond Siri and maybe what I saw on TV. Only because I never thought it would be a reality. But it is becoming a reality every single day of our lives. It's being implemented in places we never even considered. James is a leading thinker on AI. And if you haven't read his book, I highly suggest checking it out.
You're listening to the Wait What If podcast.
We're about to blow stuff up.
Reporting is easy to fake, and it's not fake, but there's a company called Narrative Science that does a lot of creates a lot of sports articles from undercovered teams that just don't get any other would not get an article in the paper.
Okay.
Narrative Science does thousands of sports articles. I compare, in my book, Our Final Invention, I compare two paragraphs written about the same game, one by AI, one by
That's right.
a human, and they're pretty hard to tell apart.
Yeah.
But in terms of the game itself, I don't see when it's going to. I'm not sure when it's going to be more interesting to watch a robot play a game than it will be to watch a human play a game.
Right.
Another way to look at it is, we use AI as a big part of graphics modeling now, and they're kind of doing away with actors.
Yeah.
And they can scan actors, and that's it's AI that fills in those gaps between different images of the actors.
That's right. Star Wars had a fellow that died, 15 years ago. And,
right, yeah.
And they brought him back. And then even, I can't remember her name, but Princess Leia died, and she had put in her will that she didn't want to be used after her death,
Oh, really? And
yeah.
did they use her?
I don't believe so. I think they were, they're done with her.
Well, that's a good question when it comes to social media. Do we have a right to die?
Yeah.
Do we have a right to retire our accounts?
So if you look at Mr. Barrat's work, it's a lot of filmmaking and historical documentaries. What is a documentary filmmaker doing focusing most of his time on AI? How did this even get on his radar?
I made a film about AI around the year 2000, and I interviewed Ray Kurzweil and Rodney Brooks, and both of those guys were very positive about the future to come, and we'll share the planet with smarter than human machines. Ray Kurzweil's a super inventor. He works for Google now as head of their big brain project. Rodney Brooks is the premier roboticist of our time. Mm-hmm. They were very optimistic. But I talked to Arthur C. Clarke. I went to Sri Lanka, and it was really a great joy to spend a day with him. And he was saying, well, not so much. Intelligence will win out in whatever form. And so it got me thinking about the downside of AI. And I made a film in 2000, but then when I wanted to make a film about AI risk, I didn't think a film was appropriate. I thought a book would be better. In a documentary film of 1 hour, you get about 5,000 words.
Okay.
In a book, you can get, like mine, you get, I think it ended up being almost 100,000 words or over 300 pages.
Yeah.
So it's a subject that it's hard to treat it in a document. And what filmmakers do in that sort of commercial documentary world is they take complex subjects and make them simple to understand. And so writing a book about AI was not really a big stretch from the stuff I normally do. It was just a matter of interviewing a lot of people, visiting a lot of people, doing a lot of background reading, having a lot of people to bounce my ideas off of, and so it was like filmmaking, but with a much smaller crew.
Throughout history, what role does science fiction play in predicting the future? All we have to do is look at our past to see where science fiction has helped mold the futures that we live in. Look no further than H.G. Wells with space travel, or to a lesser extent 2001: A Space Odyssey with HAL compared to Siri. Are times like the singularity science fiction, or will it come to fruition?
There is a phrase, we need to be careful about science fiction. Werner Vinge is extremely important to this conversation. Werner Vinge is a science fiction writer and mathematician, and he came up with the whole term, the singularity. And his was very different from Ray Kurzweil's. For him, the singularity, for the original, he originally quoted it in the 90s, Werner Vinge, to say that we can't really understand what will happen. We science fiction writers are facing a crisis because we don't know what will happen when we share the planet with smarter than human machines, so we can't really write about it. And the singularity, the cosmological meaning is it's the event horizon, a black hole. It's the point at which light can't escape, the point at which once you go past that, light can't escape, or you can't really know what's in there. And so he was using it as this term of unknowability. And Kurzweil rebranded it as being this utopian period where nano, info, bio, and cogno technologies all come together to solve all our problems, right, including mortality.
And I always had trouble with that word because when I first heard it, it's sort of ambiguous because I want to, when I hear the singularity, I picture in my head the Big Bang, the bing, the moment it all comes together. But it's not very descriptive, so it's like, well, what exactly is it? And will it happen? Will we have that Big Bang, or is it going to be more of a?
I think it's kind of nonsense. I think it's kind of a marketing thing.
Yeah.
The technological singularity, the definition that Kurzweil's come up with, is the point at which we share the planet with smarter than human machines, and at that point, all these different technologies come together, and then they solve all our problems. But it's not clear to a lot of people that when we reach that point of sharing the planet with machines that are thousands or millions of times more intelligent than we are, that will be the end of our problems. A lot of us think it might be the beginning of our problems.
Next, James discusses how the concept of artificial intelligence are gradually becoming part of the zeitgeist of the 21st century. AI is slowly moving from fictional boogieman to reality in many aspects of life.
It's interesting. When I.J. Good came up with the idea of the intelligence explosion, and that's basically the idea that if we create smarter than human machines, they'll be better than us at everything, including creating smart machines. Mm-hmm. And then the pace of intelligence will exceed beyond our ability to control it. When he came up with that idea, he was evaluating a machine called a perceptron, which was a one-layer neural net. Now, what's been interesting is that now, 60 years later almost, where neural nets and deep learning, which are deep neural nets, and deep adversarial learning, which is this whole new twist on neural nets, have become this really powerful engine in AI innovation. So, if I could have anticipated, I talk about neural nets in a couple of places in the book as black box systems, which they are. Mm-hmm. Meaning you can adjust the inputs and you can see what the outputs are, but you don't know what's going on inside. And I said at the time, or I wrote at the time, that kind of disqualifies them for security sensitive applications. But I didn't realize that neural nets would be quite so great. There was a confluence a few years ago of better processors, using GPUs, not CPUs, to do AI. The availability of big data because of all the sensors and the cheapness of processors, access to big data, and then techniques like neural nets. Those three things came together to create this revolution we're in right now. I didn't anticipate that, and I don't think anybody did. And now it's really, really exciting. It may not take us all the way to human level intelligence in a machine, but it's doing some pretty amazing things with medicine, with science, with pharmacological research.
So our Final Invention came out back in 2013, 5 years ago. Not long ago in the general terms of things, but in the digital age, that is a long time. Over the past 5 years, I asked James if anything concerning AI has surprised him.
I think people are getting, there's one sort of basic fact, and that's that scientists aren't going to stop developing artificial intelligence. And even though we may be decades or up to, a century away from creating human level intelligence as smart as a machine, machine intelligence as smart as a human.
Right.
We're eventually going to get there. And that's pretty inescapable. And if we get there, then we get to the point where machines are making intelligent machines, and they're setting the pace of intelligence growth, and we'll be sharing the planet with machines that are millions of times smarter than we are. Mm-hmm. And that's when people understand that's really kind of the inescapable truth. Then they start becoming very interested in the question of, can we coexist with these machines? Mm-hmm. And it becomes, and then they realize why people like me and Stuart Russell and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking say this is the most important conversation of our time. I think people are getting on because, Elon Musk about once a month chirps up and says, we're all going to die. And it's
yeah.
And then what's good about it though is that makes journalists go out and ask questions and bring this material to the public.
Right.
So I do think I'm very happy to say, I don't think I was a pioneer. I think I was part of the zeitgeist because a lot of people were getting it at exactly the sort of same time. Mm-hmm. And people like, there's a great AI thinker named Eliezer Yudkowsky who started a group called the Singularity Institute back around 2000, 2001. He was thinking about this. He's been thinking about this since 2000. And, there's another guy who's at Oxford. His name he's very important to this conversation, but he's also been thinking about it since around 2000. So, those of us who came to it around, in the later 2000s, 2008, 2009, were the latecomers because a lot of good thinking had been done already. There's another guy named Steve Almahundro, who I write a lot about in my book, and he's been thinking about it for a long time. So it's great. It's great that it's finally getting some press. It's not all hysterical. A lot of it's hysterical, but I think it's a good thing. There's been a couple of hearings on Capitol Hill. I think, like a lot of others do, that ultimately will need regulation over AI. So yeah, I'm happy about where it's going. I wish it were going there faster because I think it's developing exponentially, but our insights about how to develop it safely are not developing exponentially.
So looking back at AI being the boogeyman for so many years, just look at HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Terminator, or my favorite Ava from Ex Machina. Folks have become accustomed to dismissing true AI as nothing more than a fictional character which will never come to fruition.
I think we've been, as I wrote in our Final Invention, I think we've been inoculated by movies, so we don't worry about it. In the movies, we always come out ahead. There's this hard-bitten band of professionals that have just enough guts to defeat and smarts to defeat the AI monster. But it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we shouldn't base our defense tactics on movies. Mm-hmm. There's a phrase that goes with that that says, "Don't generalize from fictional evidence," and that means don't develop strategies based on movies and books you've seen and read. Mm-hmm. It's not. And the other thing is, Bill Joy said years ago. He wrote a really influential essay called "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us," and he said in that essay somewhere. Just because you saw it in the movie doesn't mean it can't happen. So just because you saw a homicidal robot in 2001: A Space Odyssey, just because you saw that already doesn't mean it can't really happen.
Right. So although it remains a possibility that robots will become our overlords, James seems to feel that an AI boogeyman may be more covert than obvious. We may have already fallen victim to this. And more so, maybe the villains aren't AI in themselves, but the people who manipulate the technology.
I'm more encouraged that we have more people thinking about the issue. I'm discouraged because the companies who are really in charge of the issue, the people that are developing AI, and I'm talking about Amazon, Baidu, Google, are behaving so foolishly and recklessly that I'm discouraged, because I think that when important decisions need to be made, they'll be doing something nefarious, and not. And for example, Facebook's took all our data and sold it to a foreign entity to influence an election in the United States. Mm-hmm. Apple has been involved in, they work with a company called Foxconn, which is the largest industrial manufacturer, and they've been again and again, Apple has turned its back against horrible working conditions for people in China, where there are 10 suicides in the last year. There are people that are living in completely unsanitary conditions. And this is just par for the course for companies like Apple and Google. So what I'm encouraged by organizations like the Future of Life Institute and the Machine Intelligence Research Institute that are doing things to try to address the ethical development of AI. But I more and more I'm concerned that the corporations developing AI, we can't rely on them to monitor themselves. Google, for example, has 400 lawyers. 400 lawyers because they've been sued in more than 20 countries for infringements involving privacy, unfair labor practices, copyright, patent violations, you name it. Facebook was fined in Australia for targeting at-risk children. I believe, check this out. If kids use the words lonely, worthless, sad in online messages, a Facebook algorithm targeted them for ad bombardment because sad children are more prone to impulse purchases.
Wow. Yeah,
and Apple was recently caught slowing down the performance of older iPhones, including the one I have, so that the users would buy newer phones.
Yeah, we figured that out, me and my wife. We're like, why is all this stuff stop working? Yeah.
Well, this the good news is maybe we'll survive the intelligence explosion, and maybe we'll survive superintelligence. The bad news is the companies that are going to have to guide us through this are about the most irresponsible that we could possibly imagine. So, and their list of just silly, nefarious deeds just keeps adding up, despite the fact that they're making such extraordinary amounts of money. But and then there's the question. There's this issue of Facebook patented an algorithm that told lenders that gave inside information to lenders so they wouldn't give mortgages to people of certain races and women.
Wow.
Because there's real data bias that embeds racial and gender prejudice into decisions about mortgages, into decisions about who gets into college. Last year, Amazon came under fire for algorithms that limited its delivery service in many minority neighborhoods. In the UK and the US, employment agencies have been penalized for computer-generated decisions that discriminate against race and gender. So there's a bank in New Jersey that was fined $33 million for using zip code data to deny mortgages to minority individuals. And this was based on algorithms. They didn't do redlining, which is sort of the old way to discriminate against certain neighborhoods. You redline around certain zip codes. But these zip codes were part of this overall algorithm that would grant or deny mortgages. They basically, the reason some of these are biased is because they were hand coded in the 1990s. These data sets that were these algorithms are fed data. The data was hand coded in the 90s and early 2000s, and it contained the biases of the people that created it.
Okay.
So they're not acting autonomously. They're unconscious. They're just an algorithm. You plug in someone's information, and they get a mortgage or they don't get a mortgage. But if you look under the hood, there's long-term racial and gender bias, in the formula.
So all this seems maddening, and it should make you angry to know that corporations are basically eavesdropping on your daily activities. But we go online voluntarily. Aren't we knowingly handing over this information?
Right. Zuckerberg said it best when he said, "Fuck 'em." Because that was his response. People said, somebody said to him, but Mark Zuckerberg, people have an assumption of privacy, and he said, "Oh, they signed on to Facebook, so fuck them."
Yeah.
So every time there's a saying in AI or saying in computers that if the product is free, then you're the product. So if you're getting a free service, you're not really getting a free service. You're giving all the data it can possibly want. What it really is a data-hungry animal that you've given permission to. So, yeah, we are to blame for signing over our data this way, but we need a smarter way for us to frame it, because we've done this. It's just a slippery slope, and we can't expect everybody to be a contract lawyer. Every time you agree to a agreement. A services agreement. Every time you install some new software, you click on this service agreement. I was just bombarded with a lot of privacy updates.
Yeah,
but I'm sure.
Too.
And so, but what they all mean is that you don't have any privacy,
right?
Basically, and so we have to decide. But more and more, you have to use these tools to live in this economy.
Exactly.
So, is it really a choice? Is it made under free and fair conditions? I'd argue, no, it's not really. They've got a lock on the tools that we need. They've made 2 or 3 monopolies that compel us to use these tools, and then they just take our data. They're not really contracting for it. It's all happening so fast that I like to think that maybe organizations will and people will get more educated about exactly what they're giving up. For example, they just showed that. Was it Amazon Echo was listening far more than... So a case came up where Amazon Echo listened to a conversation and then mailed the conversation to another, a person on the contact list. It was an accident. But it highlighted something Amazon didn't want highlighted, and that was that the Echo was listening a lot more than anyone thought it was.
I've had 2 instances where I heard Siri make her blinking noise, and I looked down, and there was 3 pages of the conversation I just had. That's happened to me twice. And I think, I don't know how the bug happened, but it's happened to me twice. And I looked down, I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
My sense is it's probably not as much of a bug as we think. That the Street View cars, Google's Street View cars used to suck up, as they drove down the street, they sucked up local area network data, including passwords and data.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. You should look that up. They were sued in several countries in Europe, and they promised to stop doing it, and then they kept doing it, and then they promised again, and then they kept doing it, and then they got sued in like 4 more countries, and then they stopped. They're probably doing it again. But the point of that is, these machines are what we perceive to be accidents are probably not really accidents. And these machines are much more data hungry than we know. Data. There's another phrase just for your audience. It's data is the new oil. Data really makes these systems go, and these systems are going to be extremely profitable, and they're going to be way more profitable in the future.
So your thoughts are completely private until you put your thoughts on the internet. And sometimes we do this without realizing, through search queries, chat conversations, or any other online activity. Just be aware that all this activity has been monitored and logged. Let that sink in.
Oh, I've got everything you've ever done on the internet. If you look on my Twitter feed, I tweeted about this weeks ago. But some smart journalist wrote an article about all the different things that Google knows about you and Facebook, and it was astounding. It was basically all the places you've been, all the people you've talked to, all the conversations you've had, everyone you've called.
Wow.
Any place you've searched on the web. And not only that, it's got all your connections, and I kind of knew that. It's got everybody you've ever texted or emailed to. It's kind of cross-indexes you with them, and it was astounding. I don't know that. If you look on my Twitter feed, just James Barrat on Twitter, and backtrack a couple of months, there's this really eye-opening article about exactly how much Google knows, and Facebook is even more sort of diabolical. They gather, even if you're not a member of Facebook, they gather information about you. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, but
well, it would make sense if you're posting pictures of your child. It's going to see the face. It's going to get to know the face as it grows and put a name with it. And it'll see this child doing whatever you're doing with this kid, what he's playing with, it makes sense that it'll be mining that information.
Well, the trouble with all this mining, all this unrestricted mining, this is why I wouldn't have an Amazon Echo in my home or whatever the other Google version is, Google Home, is because you'll be talking with your wife someday about your hernia operation, how you need another operation, and then the conversation will go to, we're dangerously close to bankruptcy, honey. And then you'll find, you clear everything up, your health gets better, and you find that you're still rejected for insurance, or you're turned down for a loan, because this data is going somewhere. It's being gathered, it's being collated, it's being assigned to you, and then it's being sold to someone. Just the way that Facebook sold, 60 million Facebook clients to Cambridge Analytica.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, well, it's been done. It just happened right in front of our eyes. All this data was sent to Cambridge Analytica, and that was used to influence an election.
Wow.
So it's not anymore. It's not as we were just discussing. It's not that in my mind that AI is being developed too quickly and making too many great strides and with too little safeguards. It's that the people that are going to be responsible for it when it reaches critical mass, when it actually becomes an existential risk, they're not trustworthy. They've proven themselves again and again to not be trustworthy.
So there's a lot of talk about the danger of anthropomorphizing AI. This means to take something inanimate like technology and put human emotions or human motives to it. Look no further than when folks name their cars or their phones. It has been said time and time again that this is a very dangerous practice when it comes to artificial intelligence.
I think that was part of an interview with Eliezer Yudkowsky when he said anthropomorphizing is the most dangerous thing we can do
Right.
in conversations with AI. And that's simply, we love to impute motive to inanimate objects. We impute motive to inanimate objects. So a volcano blows up, and, well, it's not really inanimate, it's kind of animate. But a volcano blows up, and we call it, the thunder god, or the god of the mountain. Weather patterns, a mountain gets a name. Mm-hmm. We give and we say things. We have gods that take revenge on us just because for whatever reason, willy nilly. When we're dealing with AI, we can't think of it as human. We can't be lulled into thinking that it's going to behave that it might love us because we created it, or it might like us because we created it.
I see. Okay.
So we can't impute those motives into a machine, and that's the danger of anthropomorphizing. It's anticipating that the machines we create will be naturally sympathetic, mm-hmm. when in fact they're just machines, and there'll be no more. They won't love you any more than your toaster. And so when we get to machines of greater and greater intelligence, we'll be lulled into thinking that they're friendly, especially while digital assistants. There's this whole science of making them friendly. Mm-hmm. The whole digital assistant science is trying. It's a hugely growing sector of AI that's really trying to convince us that AI is fuzzy and warm. And it's analyzing us to see what gets through our defenses, and it's going to be hugely successful. But it's a big mistake for us to think that these machines are anything like humans.
I think it's so hardwired into us that I don't know if it'd be possible not to.
Well, and then at some point when they're really smart and really interesting, then why not just accept the fact that they're interesting and smart? I mean. Yeah. Except for the danger. There's a device I heard about called Confidant. It was basically a super smart digital assistant. And you know how when you talk to Siri, and there's a lag because you ask it a question. That question is put in a packet of information. It goes to a transmission tower, then it goes to a processing center, then back to the tower, then back to your phone. Mm-hmm. So you can't really have a conversation with it. But in the future, in the not too distant future, we'll have AI-specific chips in the phones, and we'll have better storage of data in the phones, and there'll still be a background information retrieval going on with that processing center. But in the foreground, your experience of it will be an actual conversation. And that will be very, very interesting and very compelling, and maybe even a useful product. If you think about all the elderly people and people who are secluded,
yeah,
these devices will learn about us. They'll learn, and maybe not all of that is a bad thing.
Is the demarcation line between humans and computers the whole idea of emotion and empathy? Can a computer? I had this little thought experiment that if you gave me a AI baby, it had the skin like a baby and it looked like a baby, but it's not real. This baby is not real. It's synthetically made. Could I drown it in the bathtub? And the answer is no. I don't think I could actually do that, even though I know it's not real. You tell a computer to do that, it's ones and zeros, sure.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. People name everything. People have names for their phones. They have names for their cars. Mm-hmm. We fall into that trap. We have this mammalian inheritance of empathy. The machines won't have. They'll have the only empathy they'll have will be programmed into it, and they won't. I'm not sure if that's really empathy.
Yeah. Does it matter if, so say a computer can successfully emulate empathy, emotion, and it can trigger that response in us? Does it matter that it's not real? I mean, as far as we're concerned, it is, and should it be taken at that value?
At some point, I'd be willing to put down my defenses and say, if we've reached the point where we've got human-like machines, and they seem to have the whole spectrum of empathy, then then I'd be willing to put down my gun and say, maybe we should give them a chance, because we really need more assistance. We need help for the elderly. We need. It'd be great to have, them do a lot of crummy jobs. But this is why the Turing test is so important. Turing called it the imitation game. For your listeners, the Turing test is a test of intelligence where a human judge listens to two things interact on a teletype, and they're talking back and forth, and the judge is asking questions. If the judge can't tell the difference between the two, between which thing is human and which is a machine, then the machine is judged to be intelligent. So what Turing was saying was that, and he came up with this in 1950, was that he was saying, one, the nuances and vagaries and specificity of language are so interesting and so require so much brain power that if you can master that, along with a giant ontology of common sense knowledge and a giant database of learning, if you can accomplish all that, he's saying, then you should be called intelligent. But he's also saying, if you can fake it to a human judge's satisfaction, why not call that intelligence too? Mm-hmm. And I think if we're in a Westworld-like environment, which is still, super science fiction and, 2 or 3 centuries away, if you were in that kind of environment, then why not give them the sort of the rights and treatment we give humans?
And yet, with all our strides with understanding AI, implementing AI, and even learning ethics through trial and error, AI is still the sci-fi boogeyman, which is evident in popular culture with the success of something like, say, Westworld.
I sat on a panel with Jonathan Nolan, and he knows, you have to do your homework to get that good about AI. What I find unrealistic about that, and also the movie Ex Machina, is that it would be very unusual, or it's sort of scientifically implausible for some corporation or some person to not just achieve human level intelligence, but also to achieve that kind of fine-tuned robot at the exact same time. So you've got this incredible brain in this machine, and you've got this body that can do virtually anything our bodies can do. It's not going to happen at the same time. I think robotics are lagging pretty far behind.
The last topic we talk about is autonomous weapons and how they're completely unethical and unfortunately look like they're going to be the future of warfare.
Well, that's a complicated question, and I don't have a ready answer for that except this: I don't want to pay tax dollars. I don't want to be part of a civilization that puts the kill decision in the hands of robots. And the reason is as soon as you do that, you take the blame away from humans. You take the volition away from humans, and you free up some general someplace from having made this decision. For Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we had no maintenance plan for that technology, and the will of the people, or the will of the people through the president, was expressed in using these weapons. And I'm not going to argue whether it was a good or bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a bullet is it's a human act to fire a bullet. I'm not ready ethically to let humans off the hook by having robots do their killing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to muddy the water and take away praise and blame for acts of war.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah, I think it's the sentimental argument they're going to come at us with is this. They're going to say, would you rather send your sons to war, or would you rather send robots? Well, of course, who wants to send their sons to war?
Yeah.
But
it's a straw man. It's a straw man argument.
Well, it's also tell your son to get a different job if you don't want him to go to war,
mm-hmm.
and let him make up his own mind.
Right.
But what's going to happen? You can see this movie playing out already in any kind of armed conflict we go into, where overwhelming technology is used against poor people in poor armies in poor parts of the world, and so you won't see armies of robots going against each other. You'll see armies of humans going against armies of robots. And I don't want my tax dollars going there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Pessimist or optimistic view about about AI? Because I still have this image. Your book did this to me. I have this image of nanobots tearing my body apart molecule by molecule.
Yeah, good.
That was very effective.
With you.
Very effective.
I think if I had my own doomsday clock, I would take it back a notch, because I was just reading something about Gary Marcus wrote he's a psychologist, AI maker, who teaches at NYU. Just wrote something about how hard AI is, and he applied it to neural nets. And I'm not sure if it was in the New Yorker or not. And then I realized that I sort of knew this already, but that neural nets and deep learning and deep adversarial learning, which is really pretty phenomenal, how AlphaGo Zero defeated the game of Go without ever seeing a game of Go. While it's all pretty phenomenal, it's a long way from having a unified cognitive architecture that can do all the things that we can do. Mm-hmm. So that just puts off the problem. But putting off the problem, and what I mean by that is that puts off the problem of sharing the planet with something smarter than us. But putting off the problem buys us time. And then while we put the problem off, we get more smart people like, the Future of Life Institute, Max Tegmark at MIT. You get more people like Nick Bostrom. He was the name I was trying to remember earlier. He's been thinking about this problem since 2000.
That's right.
You get smart people with more time to figure out how to do this, and also more opportunities for real regulation to come into place. So I'd say I'm slightly more optimistic than I was before. However, I'm still, I still am appalled by the hands that these technologies are in. I'm appalled by how irresponsible these corporations are. And it's like, we don't need to fear the technology. We need to fear the people who are using it.
Mm-hmm. That's it, folks. Thanks for checking out the Wait What If podcast. As always, go over to www.waitwhatif.com to find out more about the Wait What If podcast, look at bios, articles, and a whole catalog of past episodes. Thanks again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.